AI could catalyse the biggest transformation talent functions have ever seen. But with growing constraints and rising legal scrutiny, does getting there mean changing how we think about risk? Keep listening to find out. Support for this podcast comes from Smart Recruiters. Are you looking to supercharge your hiring? Meet Winston, Smart Recruiters' AI-powered companion. I've had a demo of Winston. The capabilities are extremely powerful, and it's been crafted to elevate hiring to a whole new level. This AI sidekick goes beyond the usual assistant, handling all the time-consuming admin work so you can focus on connecting with top talent and making better hiring decisions. From screening candidates to scheduling interviews, Winston manages it all with AI precision, keeping the hiring process fast, smart, and effective. Head over to smartrecruiters.com and see how Winston can deliver superhuman results.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 769 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. The pressure on talent functions right now is intense. Budgets are tight, teams are stretched, and the mandate to do more with less has pushed many organisations to automate at speed without stopping to redesign what they were automating. These automated decisions are now attracting real legal and regulatory attention. Actions previously seen as being simple process steps are now potentially being viewed from a legal perspective as consequential decisions. At the same time, there's a growing recognition that AI could be a true catalyst, forcing the kind of fundamental change that talent functions have needed for years. So, how do leaders navigate the constraints while seizing that opportunity? My guest this week is Kyle Lagunas, founder of Kyle & Co. In our conversation, Kyle unpacks what defensibility really means in practice, why talent teams need to shift from risk avoidance to risk readiness, and how AI is catalyzing long overdue transformation. Hi, Kyle, and welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Matt. I am so excited to be here.
Well, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show, so it's brilliant to have you back again. For the few people out there who may not have heard of you and your work, just please introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do.
I have one of the coolest jobs in the space. It's also a weird job. I am an industry analyst, and so my job is to study innovation cycles in the world of HR tech and transformation. I founded my own firm last year called Kyle & Co. And we are where research meets reality. We're really trying to put a heavy practitioner lens on all of the work that we do to make sure that we're tracking what's really going on in the industry and not just some big ideas that people are cooking up in the ivory tower. So keeping things grounded today.
Absolutely. And really on that note, we've sort of been talking about your new HR trends report. The world is full of predictions, particularly about AI at the moment. But what's kind of really interesting about what's come across from what you're writing about is credibility under constraint. Tell us what you mean by that.
Oh my goodness. So first of all, I presented on AI trends. I mean, we all do all the time, right? But this makes me laugh. I have to share this. I asked very recently, I was putting all right, today we're going to talk about what everyone's talking about. What is HR's favorite 2-letter word these days? People want to shout AI, right? Somebody in the back said, no. Oh, that's not it. No.
It's true, but it's it is.
It is true. But it's nice to know that even in some really crowded rooms where everybody's talking about the same thing, people are still thinking a little differently. Well, so constraint. I am very concerned with some of the issues that we are facing and the impact of those on us as an organization and talent in HR. It is become apparent to me that as I look across the other functions of the business and their pace of change, their pace of adoption, their success rates for integrating AI innovations, they're ahead. They are ahead of us. I am concerned that some of the constraints that we're stuck with are potentially holding us back and eroding some of the credibility that we need to be good partners to the business. We need to be able to meet the business where they are right now. We need to have a seat at the table for everybody was talking about seat at the table and like in the C-suite or the ELT, just in general for us to be seen as an important part of the business. The seat at the table that we need a seat at now is at these AI councils, where we are deciding how the organization is going to navigate AI, how we're going to, what we're going to prioritize, what our plan is for impact to our customer experience and to our workers. And I am just not sure that that every HR organization is ready to sit at that table. And so that's kind of what I'm considering. The other part is, of course, the catchphrase that we've all heard for the last 18 months probably is do more with less. And so that's kind of where HR is at too. Like, we're not a business driver. We are a cost center. And so we are constrained with what we can be doing with AI, like just because of the resources that we have. But I think that it's created a juxtaposition where we are not just being asked to do more with less. We're being asked to do better work than we've ever done before, produce higher output and higher quality output, not just higher volume of output. And it's just like this juxtaposition of trends that it's like really hard to reconcile. So as I'm looking at what we should be expecting this year, I'm expecting some bumpy road.
You kind of mentioned some of the constraints there around being seen as delivering something, not being seen as strategic. What else is it that's making HR and TA not ready for this? Is it mindset? Is it what is it? What else is there holding everyone back?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is just the complexity of the use cases that we have. You sit in the UK. I'm sure that you are familiar with the EU AI Act, and they really are considering in major bodies of legislation, HR and employment use cases as highly sensitive and categorized as high risk. Well, you know as well as I do that in automating interview scheduling, which is a very popular AI project, right, is actually not very high risk in terms of like amplifying employer bias in decision making, right? It's not really in high risk of as the way most of us think about it. But there are other cases where matching and scoring algorithms and black box AI around how we evaluate inbound applications, a little nuanced, right? So I think that's partly what we're up against. The challenge being, historically, we have as a function been risk avoidant, and people say risk averse, but that's not it. We've been risk avoidant, and the nuance there is to be risk averse. I think that you do need to look at what factors are really at play. You need to calculate what actual exposure you have, right? You need to come up with plans to mitigate scenarios where you might have exposure, direct exposure, and manage risk, right? Because we have been so heavily avoidant, I don't think that we really have those muscles, and more so, we might have those muscles isolated in a couple of like key players in our teams. We don't have that mindset across our culture, our operating cultures, and across the profession. So that's another like just hurdle that we have to clear. And we talk about transformation. I do think that AI, in not just the application of that technology, but exploring this new pillar of innovation, I am not being colloquial. I say I believe it will be truly catalytic for us. It really will catalyze a lot of much overdue transformation in who we are and how we operate.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think there's really interesting points there. And it kind of leads on to something else that you talk about a lot, which is defensibility as a core capability, because we know that already we are seeing lawsuits emerging around AI. You mentioned there some of the legislation and the element of dealing with risk. So what do you mean by defensibility, and what does it look like in practice?
Oh, this is such a fascinating conversation because we have to look backwards to look forwards here. We have a lot that we can learn from. I think that we were preoccupied because we had these cost-cutting measures and these budgetary constraints. We really were primarily focused on utilizing AI to scale our existing operations without adding cost. And what that did, Matt, was we just increased the number of processes that were being run, the volume of processes that we were being run through tech. Most of us didn't have the resources or the corporate calories, I call them, to burn to optimize those processes before we automated them. So we really just scaled operations without really changing anything. Do you remember when we moved to cloud? We did the same thing, baby, right? It just lifted and shifted. We put the same thing in a different place. And I do think that because of when this AI catalyst is occurring, that behavior has repeated. The issue with that is that AI really is very good at scaling processing power. So we have kept the same things and moved them to a whole nother level of scale. And so we have maybe like the reliance on matching and scoring tools to help us just cut through inbound applications. I think that we have been making a lot of just surface level decisions necessity drove that, but we have been making a lot of surface level decisions to get through all of the inbound, like to get through the work that we have to get done. And I don't know that we necessarily looked at how we had trained those AI matching and scoring algorithms. I actually implemented one in when I was on the practitioner side. And so I have some experience with this. Many of them they have a core algorithm, right, which train like how they learn, like how they can, what data artifacts to look at and how to contextualize it, et cetera. Like what processes is it trying to support? But most of the local, like most of where it's deployed for you it's going to observe your recruiting practices. It's going to look at the kinds of universities that you source from, the kinds of background that is successful for each role. And so it's learning from our past processes. And so when we have implemented these tools that help us make decisions faster based on what's historically, and I'm doing air quotes here, worked, we really have not done the actual solution design. We haven't actually mined our processes and mined our decision-making structures before scaling them. And so here now this defensibility question coming, and welcome everyone to the mind of an analyst. We are long-winded. We're deep thinkers, I would like to say. The defensibility is very much in question because we're now on the other side of this push for scale, this push for efficiency, and we're recognizing we actually automated a bunch of just stuff, man. Like we really have a large volume of automated decisions being made, and a decision is not necessarily changing a candidate status. We're finding that's what's coming up in these courts is some of these things are being considered as decisions. We need to make sure that as we do utilize AI to scale and to conduct more volumes of work per person, we need to make sure that the processes, the inputs, the outputs are defensible. We need to do that mining now to look at really the psychology of how business is getting done, how people processes are being managed. And again, coming back to the top, I think this is catalyzing some long overdue change. I welcome it. The defensibility is really important. It is us actually leaning into that risk management side. We need to understand what our real exposure is. And that is driving, I think, some really good work around how we decide who moves forward, who's a fit, who gets promoted, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. A fascinating point about some of the things that we thought were just automation or process or execution can actually be seen as decisions. I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about. And I suppose leading on from that, in terms of restructuring TA teams and thinking about roles, all this automation is kind of really posing what's execution and what's about judgment. If you're a head of TA again, and you're restructuring a team, what does that balance look like? How does this play out? What needs to change?
Well, first I need to document these things. That's part of this too, is it is one thing to say that we are using these inputs as just a source of data. It is another to build into your documented workflows and processes what human in the loop actually looks like, Matt. It needs to be designed and not assumed. It's human in the loop is a solution design. It is not a tagline, right? And so that's what I would start to lean into if I'm back in that leader role, is I'm leaning heavily on my ops team to help me take what are good ideas and operationalize them. That is the only way that this change, that we can march forward with confidence, is that we are putting new building blocks in place, and that we are training people on how these things can and can't be used. And so I'm going to look at if I'm using matching and scoring tools to just help us prioritize our inbound. I'm going to have documentation that I expect that every candidate is still reviewed. I operate in North America, in the US, which needs to be EEOC compliant. We need to review every single application, right? And I am going to have documentation where I'm running my own independent audit regularly of any potential adverse impact that these tools are having. These governing bodies, they actually are really happy to see some good faith effort. If I am doing, especially because we don't have a ton of AI specific regulation right now pervasively, they are okay to watch this private sector do its best. And so I definitely want to have third-party audits. You'd better believe that my QBRs with my vendors are not about vanity metrics anymore, right? It is about responsible innovation. If you want to bring to me a new feature, then that's another conversation. That's not in our QBR. We're going to need to engage my InfoSec, my compliance team, my legal team's going to have, we're not willy-nilly just going to turn things on now. I'm going to have a lot more structure. And I actually do see this playing out. It's not just Kyle's best idea, because again, we're trying to ground these things in reality. Whereas I am seeing not a lot of headcount being added into sourcing and recruiting and coordinator roles, I am seeing headcount being added into the specialized core programs teams. And I do think this is where we look across other major tech innovations. A lot of people point to the Industrial Revolution. Specialized headcount is something that we will anticipate. I know I would be making a strong highly defensible business case to have people that are going to come in and help me build out much more rigorous programs about how we adopt, implement, and monitor the tools that we have. I think that's going to be a huge part of it.
One thing that really strikes me from all of this is we've moved to a world where machines are being held to a much higher standard than humans ever were in recruiting. So, why is that? Or what are the implications of that? What does that tell us about what's going on?
You're spot on. If we just stay with the matching and scoring algorithm for a moment, I think that we have early recruiting, early career recruiting. You're going to be handed a stack of resumes and a stack of job descriptions, and you are going to be weeding through those, screening those, and qualifying those yourself. Can you imagine if early in your career you got something wrong and you just got fired for putting the wrong candidate forward and never learning from it? right? And yet I literally just this morning had a conversation with somebody who was having this challenge with recruiters where the algorithm is giving them is grading somebody an A and this is so nuanced that it's stupid. There may be like a B or a C, and it's like, well, okay, well, you've done your job then, recruiter. You took that and then you qualified that, right? But instead, it's eroding trust in the tool. They're like, this is wrong. AI doesn't work. And it's like, you don't understand how it works. It does need that feedback loop to get better. I also have seen where people early in these kinds of tools, people were very wary of using them because they were worried about them automating bias, having implicit bias. Well, the way that most of these are trained is they're trained on your behaviors, right? It's going to take the black box of your hiring managers and of your recruiters' brains that are heavily human biased, and it's going to learn from them. And we're going to see those patterns, hiring patterns, actually play out in a completely documented way. Well, that's very scary. I'm not going to buy the AI. I'm also not going to take the time to go through and try to mitigate any of that human bias. I'm going to just not turn that AI feature on. And so it's kind of like head in the sand. It's a difficult psychological situation to understand.
I did some rough calculations. I kind of worked out over a 20-year career, a recruiter might review something like 250,000 resumes. And people can argue with me whether it should be less or more or whatever. It takes an AI less than a minute to review and initially rank 250,000 resumes, and the AI will read every single word rather than spending 8 seconds on them. And I think there's a bit there about understanding the capability of the machines and the nuance and the capability of the humans and having the right thing in the right place, definitely. Which comes to what you said about the humans then looking at that and kind of making a judgment.
It's a conundrum, isn't it? And that's where, if we look at where we started with AI, and by the way, these cycles are getting so small, right? We're not talking about over the course of the last decade. We're talking about over the course of like the last 10 months, not 10 years. It is important for us to be learning quickly and adapting. And so I think that having this conversation now is a good sign that we are hoping and trying to get better. I definitely do see a bit of the expectation out of ELT. The CEOs are pushing less of like, we're going all in on AI, and more of like, we need to be continuously experimenting and learning from what AI can and can't do for us. And it's changing the expectation with leadership, HR and talent leadership teams of how they're approaching. I don't know if you've seen it. I am tracking and happy to see a lot more teams building out structured, robust pilot programs for AI. Remember, like, pilots were really just a word for free seats for me to try something, right? And see if people like it. I'm doing air like, do they like it? Everyone is taking these pilot programs super seriously. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? What is the solution that we're looking for? How do we measure the impact of this solution on that problem? And if that impact was enough, then the question is, can we scale it? Like that level of rigor, arguably should have been there all the time. But neither here nor there. It's here now, and I am happy to see that.
To sort of pull all this together as a kind of a final question, how do you see this kind of playing out over the next sort of 2 or 3 years? Where does the maturity come from? What's going to happen?
The first thing that has to happen is we need to build literacy in AI across the board. Excuse me. In the past, it has been okay. Excuse me. In the past, it's been okay for us to have a central SWAT team that is going to lead the evaluation and design and implementation of a new tool, a new system. Now we need everybody on the same page. Not everybody in the entire TA team needs to be a part of solution design. That's not what I'm saying. But everyone has a role to play in AI innovation and the adoption of new AI-enabled processes and ways of working. This is not a tool. This is a way of life now. And so we need to be literate. We need to understand. There's a difference, by the way, between literacy and expertise. We don't need to be AI masters, but we all need to understand enough to spell LLM and tell you like what that means. So that's one huge change that I need to see, or that I anticipate seeing. The other is we need to become. We've talked about we need to lean into risk. We need to not be risk avoidant. We need to be risk ready. And I think that is a good thing. I think that helps us build more credibility with our partners in the business. The red tape functions, by the way, are stressed to the max. They want better partnership from us. And so I think coming into conversations where we know that they are going to bring up objections and we're going to be there to talk through things, that's going to be huge. And that used to be a drag. I think that is an excellent alignment exercise now, an excellent readiness exercise. I can't believe I'm saying that. I used to hate that stuff, but it's so important, So literacy and risk readiness, I think, are big. And then I really think we need to be focused on quality. Quality of hire has always been like top 3 things for CEOs and TA and HR, it's always been up there. But as we look at the scale that AI is bringing to our processing power, as we look to the data and insight that AI is able to bring to us at every step of every human process, of every people process, I think that we need to be obsessed with driving quality and not just volume. And I think that'll help us to discern what works and what doesn't, and help us to navigate some of it's very noisy out there. I think that it is not just what's the cool thing that we could do. It's more of how constantly obsessed with how can we be making higher quality decisions, delivering higher quality outputs consistently. That's what we should scale as quality, not volume. And so we're in chapter 2 now. I think now is a great time for us to shift that narrative.
Kyle, thank you very much for joining me. My thanks to Kyle. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.